Major Cade Spectre Sullivan believed that with every fiber of his being, it was a profound, manufactured quiet, costing $2.1 billion to create and maintain. It was the sound of the Spirit of California, a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, breathing at 35,000 feet. The 4 General Electric engines hummed at a frequency more felt than heard, a low thrum in the base of his spine. Outside the cockpit's angled windows, the sky over the South China Sea was a brilliant, unforgiving blue. Below, the water was a deep, wrinkled blanket, indifferent to the ghost gliding above it. Cade's gloved hands rested lightly on the control stick. For 10 hours, this cockpit, a cramped space filled with the cool green glow of multifunction displays, had been his universe. The mission, a classified ISR pass, was complete. Now, it was just the long, lonely ride home to Guam. He allowed himself a moment to stretch his legs, the G-suit crinkling in protest. His radar cross-section, he mused, was smaller than a pigeon's. He was a phantom, a whisper on the wind, a flicker on his threat display panel, a tiny amber symbol. His heart gave a single, hard kick against his ribs. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. What was that? His mind cycled through the possibilities. A fishing trawler's commercial radar? A weather anomaly? It was in the wrong frequency band for either. It was military. Chinese. Over the horizon. Indo-Pacific Command. This is Nightfall 01, he said, his voice a calm, practiced monotone that betrayed none of the sudden ice in his veins. I'm painting a faint, intermittent search radar, bearing 095. Looks like a coastal battery. The reply came back instantly. A digitized voice filtered through miles of encrypted space. Solid copy, Nightfall. We see it too. Maintain course and speed. You're in international airspace. Cade's jaw tightened. International airspace. A simple concept on a map. But down here, over these contested waters, lines blurred. He was flying directly over Scarborough Shoal, a place that existed more in political speeches and angry headlines than as a physical destination. To Washington, it was the high seas. To Beijing, it was a doorstep being trod upon. The amber flicker became a solid, unwavering light. Then a second symbol bloomed beside it, a targeting radar. The change was terrifyingly fast. The system wasn't just searching anymore, it was looking for him. A shrill, piercing tone screamed through his helmet. The RWR, radar warning receiver, lit up like a Christmas tree. It wasn't a search anymore. It was a lock. Command, I have missile lock. I repeat, I have hard lock. He didn't wait for a reply. Muscle memory, honed over 1,000 hours in simulators and a dozen real-world sorties, took over. He slammed the throttles forward, pushing the flying wing into a steep, banking turn. The G-forces pressed him deep into his ejection seat, his vision tunneling. Alarms blared, a symphony of imminent death. On his main display, a terrifyingly fast-moving vector appeared, screaming towards his position. An HQ-19, an anti-stealth interceptor. Mach 14, the world's deadliest arrow, aimed at its most elusive target. 42 seconds. The thought was a shard of ice in his mind. 42 seconds from launch to impact. Chaff, flare, countermeasures deployed, he grunted, his fingers dancing over the console. Outside, the bomber spat out a cloud of deceptive aluminum and burning magnesium, a desperate attempt to fool the missile's seeker head. He wrenched the stick again, pulling the B-2 into a dive, trying to put a layer of denser air between himself and the incoming killer. The countdown in his head was frantic. 30 seconds. 20. 10. He risked a glance out the side window, his eyes scanning the impossible blue. And then he saw it. A white line of smoke, impossibly thin, impossibly fast, clawing its way up from the horizon. It wasn't just a symbol on a screen anymore. It was real. 5, 4, 3. He braced for the impact, a sudden, surreal calm washing over him. He thought of his daughter's face, her laughter at the beach last summer. A ridiculous, beautiful thing to remember at the end of everything. A blinding white flash erupted miles off his port wing. It was so bright it bleached the sky, momentarily whiting out his vision. The shockwave hit a second later, a violent physical blow that tossed the $2 billion bomber like a leaf in a storm. Cade fought the controls, the stick bucking in his hands as he leveled out. The missile warning tone was gone. Silence returned. But it wasn't the calm, manufactured quiet from before. This was a ringing, deafening silence, pregnant with the implications of what had just happened. For 1 minute and 54 seconds, the world had held its breath. Now, it was about to start screaming. "Command, Nightfall 01, Cade said, his voice raspy. "Confirm missile detonation. No impact. I say again, no impact. The spirit is intact." "Solid copy, Spectre," the voice crackled back, the usual professionalism laced with an audible undertone of shock. "We saw the whole thing. Get the hell out of there. Egress immediately." As the B-2 turned west, its ghostly form melting back into the sky, Cade Sullivan knew this was far from over. China had fired on the symbol of American power. They had tried to swat the pigeon from the sky. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The secure video conference link flickered to life, connecting 3 of the most powerful offices in the world. In the White House Situation Room, President Trump leaned forward, his face a granite mask of controlled fury. In Hawaii, the commander of Indopacom stood before a wall of tactical displays, the track of the HQ-19 still glowing red. And at the Pentagon, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had a single satellite image on his screen. A hardened missile launch site on the southern coast of China, 142 nautical miles from Scarborough Shoal. "General, give it to me straight." The president's voice was low, cutting through the sterile air of the room. "Mr. President," the chairman began, "at HQ-19 local, a B-2 bomber on a routine return flight through international airspace was fired upon by a Chinese HQ-19 surface-to-air missile. The pilot, Major Sullivan, successfully evaded. The aircraft is undamaged. The launch originated from the site you're looking at now. This was not a warning shot. It was a kill shot. They knew it was a Spirit. Our analysis confirms they were tracking a radar cross-section of 0.1 square meters." The Indopacom commander added, his voice grim, "Sir, under our standing rules of engagement, this is an unprovoked act of aggression. Firing on a U.S. asset in international airspace is a clear casus belli." The president stared at the screen, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the mahogany table. A B-2 was not just an aircraft. It was 10% of the entire stealth bomber fleet. It was a $2.1 billion projection of untouchable American might. An attack on one was an attack on the entire foundation of their global deterrence strategy. "They thought we'd just let it go," Trump murmured almost to himself. "They thought we'd protest at the UN, send a strongly worded letter." He looked up, his eyes meeting the camera. They were wrong. He didn't ask for options. He didn't ask for a committee to study the geopolitical ramifications. The decision had already been made in the split second he heard the words, "missile lock." "Operation Iron Dagger is authorized," the president stated, his voice devoid of any hesitation. "A limited, precision strike. I want that exact launch site and everything in it turned into a parking lot. I want their radar blind, their missiles smashed, and their command bunker caved in. Minimal collateral damage. I want a message sent, not a war started. Make it happen." The order was given at 09:57 a.m. The countdown had begun. 6,000 miles away, on the island of Guam, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Eva Viper Rostova was jolted from a planning meeting by the klaxon that signaled a priority flash order. As the F-35C squadron commander, she lived in a state of coiled readiness. But this was different. This wasn't a drill. In the hardened briefing room, the atmosphere was electric. The mission board lit up with the skeleton of Operation Iron Dagger. 2 B-2s, call signs Nightfall 1 and Nightfall 2. Her own squadron, 2 F-35Cs, would provide stealth escort and suppression of enemy air defenses, a swarm of EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare, and from the USS Ronald Reagan, a carrier group already steaming into position, a wave of FA-18 Super Hornets carrying something special, ADM-160 Malt-J decoys. "Listen up," the wing commander barked, his face grim. "In approximately 4 hours, we are launching a retaliatory strike. The Chinese took a shot at one of our own. We're going to show them what happens when they miss." Viper felt a cold, professional focus settle over her. She studied the attack vectors on the screen. The plan was a masterpiece of deception and overwhelming force. The Super Hornets would launch the Malt-Js from the east, mimicking the radar signature of a fleet of B-52s, flooding Chinese radar with hundreds of false targets and screaming jamming signals. While their air defense operators panicked, trying to figure out which ghost was real, her F-35s would slide in low from the south, their AESA radars passively scanning, ready to unleash anti-radiation missiles on anything that dared to light up. And through the gap they created, threading a needle in the dark, would come the ghosts themselves. The B-2s, their bomb bays filled with 16 GBU-31 JDAMs, 2,000-pound bunker busters capable of hitting a specific window frame from 5 miles up. Cade Sullivan, having landed the Spirit of California less than an hour ago, was already in the briefing room, his face set. He hadn't had time to decompress, to process the fact that he'd nearly been vaporized. Now, he was being asked to climb into a sister ship, the Spirit of Georgia, and fly back into the Hornet's nest. There was no hesitation. This was personal. They had tried to kill him. Now he was going back to tear down the weapon that had tried to do it. As the pilots and crews scattered to their aircraft, the airbase roared to life. Fuel trucks like giant insects swarmed the bombers and fighters. Munitions carts, laden with gray, stenciled bombs, were carefully maneuvered under wings and into weapons bays. The KC-46A Pegasus tankers, their silver skins gleaming under the floodlights, were already being topped off with the million-plus pounds of jet fuel needed to get the strike package there and back. Viper swung herself into the cockpit of her F-35C. The canopy lowered with a hiss, sealing her inside her own technological bubble. She ran through her pre-flight checks, her hands moving with an economy born of endless practice. Through her helmet-mounted display, she could see data overlays on the world outside, waypoints, threat circles, the status of her wingman. She looked over and saw the 2 B-2s, Nightfall 1 and Nightfall 2, taxiing onto the runway. They were monstrous, alien shapes in the tropical twilight, more creature than machine. $6 billion worth of American fury, 80,000 pounds of precision munitions, and the unwavering will of a superpower were about to be unleashed. Somewhere on the Chinese coast, the crew of an HQ-19 missile battery sat in their climate-controlled bunker, perhaps congratulating themselves on their daring. They had no idea that judgment, in the form of a black wing, was already airborne and accelerating towards them through the darkness. The Philippine Sea was a black mirror reflecting a starless, overcast sky. At 02:03 a.m. local time, the strike package crossed the invisible line in the ocean that planners called the commit point. There was no turning back. Inside the cockpit of Nightfall 1, Cade, Spectre, Sullivan's world had shrunk to the glowing green displays in front of him. The B-2 was a creature of the dark, and in this moonless night, it was utterly in its element. He kept the engines at minimal thrust, a delicate balance between speed and thermal signature. To an infrared seeker below, he would be nothing more than a momentary cold spot in the upper atmosphere. He was less than 320 nautical miles from the coast, close enough to feel the enemy's presence, like a pressure change in the air. Viper 1 to Nightfall 1. Decoy swarm is active. Eva Rostova's voice crackled, calm and clipped in his ear. The party has started. Enemy radar is lighting up like a Christmas tree. Miles to the east, 32 Malt-J decoys, launched from the Super Hornets, were doing their work. Each one was a flying supercomputer, broadcasting the radar return of a B-52 bomber while simultaneously spewing 500 watts of jamming energy. On the screens of the Chinese Integrated Air Defense System, a massive aerial armada had just appeared out of nowhere, charging straight for the coast. The deception was working perfectly. Intel chatter, relayed through CADE's secure data link, showed HQ-9 and HQ-22 long-range SAM batteries slewing their launchers towards the Phantom formation. They were chasing ghosts, completely blind to the real threat approaching from the southwest. Viper and her wingman flew low and wide, a pair of sharks patrolling the edges of the strike. Her AN/AAQ-37 distributed aperture system, a network of 6 infrared cameras embedded in the F-35's airframe, gave her a 360-degree god's-eye view of the battle space. She could see the heat bloom of the decoy's engines, the distant electronic glow of the scrambling Chinese radars. Her AGM-88G anti-radiation missiles were primed, hungry for any short-range SAM that might dare to power up and threaten the B-2s on their final run. At 02 to 14 a.m., CADE eased the stick forward. Nightfall 1 and Nightfall 2 began their descent, slipping through the now porous defense network like smoke. They crossed the coastline at 31,000 feet. 2 silent, unseen daggers aimed at the heart of the facility that had tried to kill him just hours before. His APQ-181 radar, a system so advanced it could map the ground below with sub-meter resolution without giving away his position, painted a perfect picture of the target: the main radar dome. The 3 HQ-19 transporter-erector launchers parked beside it, and the hardened command bunker buried partially underground. The GPS coordinates for the JDAMs were updated in real time, locking them into their targets with an accuracy of 18 inches. A 2,000-pound key intended for a specific keyhole miles below. Nightfall 1 is weapons hot, CADE transmitted, his voice steady. Nightfall 2 is hot, came the immediate reply. He flicked the cover off the red pickle button on his control stick. Bombs away in 3, 2, 1. He pressed the button. There was no violent kick, no roar of rockets, just a series of deep, resonant thuds from the belly of the bomber as 8 tons of precision-guided munitions were released into the night. The massive plane felt momentarily lighter, freer. Silently, at nearly the speed of sound, 16 GBU-31 V-3B penetrators fell through the darkness. The first 2 bombs struck the radar dome. They pierced the fiberglass shell before their delayed fuses detonated, shattering the 60-foot phased array antenna inside into a billion pieces of scrap metal. A bloom of fire and smoke erupted into the night. The next wave of JDAMs impacted the launchers. The result was catastrophic. Each 2,000-pound warhead hit its mark, and the ensuing explosion set off the solid rocket fuel in the HQ-19 missiles. A series of violent, spectacular secondary detonations ripped the launchers apart, sending torrents of white-hot fire and shrapnel tearing across the compound. The final pair of bombs from CADE's plane were programmed for the command bunker. They punched through feet of reinforced concrete as if it were plywood, their hardened penetrator casings drilling deep into the earth. For a fraction of a second, there was nothing. Then, deep within the bunker, they detonated. The overpressure from the blast was contained, turning the inside of the supposedly impregnable structure into a pulverizing hell of pulverized consoles, vaporized servers, and collapsed walls. From the first impact to the last, the entire destruction of one of China's most advanced and expensive air defense sites took just 88 seconds. CADE didn't look back. He banked the B-2 west without afterburners, melting back into the low observable corridor they had used to enter. Viper 1, confirm target status, he requested. Stand by, Nightfall. There was a pause. Then Eva's voice returned, laced with awe. Jesus. Nightfall, I confirm total destruction of the target. The site is gone. I'm seeing multiple secondary explosions. Radar dark, comms silent. Good kill. Good kill. All stations, Iron Dagger is feet wet. We are heading home. By 03:07 a.m., the entire strike package was back over open water, leaving behind a smoking, cratered scar on the Chinese coast. The financial cost to China was staggering. Nearly $400 million in hardware erased from their inventory in less than 2 minutes. But the strategic cost was immeasurable. A 120-mile gap had been torn open in their coastal defenses. And the humiliation, the sheer shock of being hit so precisely by an enemy they never even saw, was a wound that would fester for years. As the sun began to rise over the Pacific, the B-2 Spirits were already on final approach to Guam, their engines cooling in the pre-dawn air. Cade Sullivan landed the Spirit of Georgia with a gentle bump, the mission complete. As he finally powered down the systems, the profound, expensive silence returned to the cockpit. But this time, it felt different. It was the silence of a message delivered and a lesson brutally taught. In the high-stakes game of global power, you don't take a shot at the ghost unless you're absolutely certain you can kill it. This story, though fictional, illustrates a harsh reality of modern geopolitics. Deterrence is a fragile piece, maintained by the credible threat of overwhelming force. The incident at Scarborough Shoal serves as a powerful reminder that miscalculation and aggression can have devastatingly swift and precise consequences. The true lesson isn't about the supremacy of any one piece of technology, but about the immense responsibility that comes with wielding it. Strength, when used with precision and unwavering resolve, is not just a tool for winning wars, but for preventing them. It reinforces the old adage, if you wish for peace, prepare for war. The line between a stable world and a global conflict can be as thin as a radar lock, and it is defended not just by brave men and women, but by the absolute certainty in an adversary's mind that crossing that line will bring an immediate and unforgiving response. What do you think? Was the American response justified and proportionate, or was it a dangerous escalation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analysis of the events that shape our world.